Have you ever noticed that we can send humans to space, cure diseases with mRNA technology, and carry supercomputers in our pockets, but we still can't reliably print a single-page document without wanting to throw something out a window? Think about that for a second. Your phone can recognize your face in the dark, translate 30 languages in real time, and stream 4K video from halfway around the world. But your printer can't figure out if it has paper in it. Here's what nobody talks about. We've accepted printer dysfunction as normal, like it's just part of life. Oh, the printer's acting up again? Classic printer behavior. But imagine if your car worked like your printer. You'd turn the key and it would say, "Driver unavailable." You'd fill up the tank and it would refuse to start because the windshield wiper fluid is low. You'd drive perfectly fine on Monday. Then on Tuesday, it would forget how to reverse. You'd call the dealership and they'd tell you to turn the car off and on again. You wouldn't tolerate that for a second. You'd sue somebody. But with printers, we just shrug and waste 3 hours of our lives on a Tuesday afternoon trying to print a boarding pass. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to understand why printers are uniquely terrible in ways that no other technology can match. And more importantly, you're going to learn that this isn't an accident. It's not bad luck. It's a deliberate, calculated system designed to extract maximum money from you while delivering minimum functionality. Once you see how this works, you'll never look at that beige box on your desk the same way again. So here's what's really happening. You need to print something important. Maybe it's a tax document, maybe it's a concert ticket, maybe it's homework that's due in an hour. Doesn't matter. You hit print. And then the nightmare begins. First, the printer doesn't respond. You check the cable. It's connected. You check the Wi-Fi. It's fine. Everything looks normal. But the printer, silent, dead, mocking you. So you open the printer settings on your computer, and this is where things get surreal. Your computer says the printer is offline, but the printer is literally sitting right there. It's plugged in, the lights are on. How is it offline? It's 3 feet away from you. So you restart the printer. You restart your computer, you unplug things and plug them back in, you download new drivers even though you updated them last month. And maybe after 40 minutes of troubleshooting, it finally prints. But wait, the ink is streaky. Or it's printing in the wrong color. Or it's covered in mysterious lines that weren't in your document. Or it printed perfectly but then jammed halfway through the second page. Here's what everyone tells you. Just buy a better printer. Just get the right drivers. Just use the official ink cartridges. But that's not what actually happens. What really happens is that expensive printers fail just as often as cheap ones. Official drivers are just as buggy as generic ones. And those official ink cartridges, they're the biggest scam in consumer electronics. And this matters because printers aren't optional. You need them for real things. Tax documents, legal forms, boarding passes when your phone dies, medical paperwork, job applications, school assignments. These aren't luxury items, they're requirements for participating in modern society. But the technology that's supposed to make your life easier has become an obstacle course designed to frustrate you. It's not just about the wasted time, though that's bad enough. It's about the powerlessness. The feeling that you're being held hostage by a machine that should be working for you. Let me tell you what's actually going on here. And I'm warning you, once you understand this, you're going to be even more angry at your printer. But you'll also understand why it fails in such predictable ways. There's this pattern I've noticed. Let's call it the ink hostage model. Here's how it works. Printer companies don't make money selling you printers. In fact, they often lose money on the printer itself. That cheap HP or Canon or Epson you bought at Target for $70, the company probably lost money or broke even on that sale. Their entire business model is built around selling you ink. And not just ink, proprietary ink cartridges that cost more per ounce than vintage champagne. Think about this. You can buy a brand new printer for $60, but a full set of replacement ink cartridges, that'll run you $80. The consumable costs more than the machine. It's like buying a car for $10,000, but the gas costs $15,000 to refill. Except it's actually worse than that because your car can use any brand of gasoline. Your printer? It'll only accept cartridges made by the same company with special chips inside that verify authenticity. This matters because it completely inverts the normal incentives in technology. Most tech companies want their products to work well, so you'll buy more products from them. Apple wants your iPhone to be amazing, so you'll buy an iPad and a MacBook and AirPods. But printer companies, they don't care if your printing experience is terrible. In fact, they benefit when things go wrong as long as you keep buying ink. Think about Jake. Jake buys a new printer because his old one finally died. The box says it prints wirelessly, it says it's compatible with all devices, it says it's easy to set up. Jake gets it home, plugs it in, follows the instructions. But the wireless setup fails. He tries again. Still fails. He downloads the app. The app can't find the printer, even though they're both on the same Wi-Fi network, so Jake gives up on wireless and just plugs in a USB cable. Except his laptop doesn't have a USB port anymore, it only has USB-C, so now he needs an adapter, $25 at Best Buy. Finally, Jake gets it working. He prints a test page. Looks good. He puts the printer on his desk and forgets about it for 3 weeks. Then he needs to print something. He hits print. Nothing happens. He checks the ink levels. Somehow, despite printing exactly one test page, the printer says the cyan cartridge is low. Not empty, low. But it refuses to print anything, even a black and white document, until he replaces the cyan. That's going to be $32 for one cartridge. Here's what Jake doesn't realize. The printer lies about ink levels. It has to, because the business model depends on you buying ink as frequently as possible. There's probably still weeks of printing left in that cyan cartridge. But the chip inside the cartridge has been programmed to report false low ink warnings. And even if Jake knew this, there's nothing he can do about it. The printer won't print. It's holding his document hostage until he pays the ransom. Your brain does this because of something psychologists call learned helplessness. When you encounter a system that punishes you randomly, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you can't predict which, you eventually give up trying to control it. You just accept that printers are mysterious and temperamental. But they're not mysterious. They're designed this way. The failures aren't random bugs, they're features. But here's where it gets interesting. There's another pattern at play here. I call it the complexity illusion. Printers pretend to be more complicated than they actually are. They use this fake complexity to justify their failures and to keep you dependent on buying their products. Let's break down what a printer actually does. It takes a digital file and puts marks on paper. That's it. That's the whole job. And we've had the technology to do this reliably since the 1980s. Dot matrix printers from 40 years ago were loud and slow, but you know what? They worked. You hit print, they printed. No driver issues, no Wi-Fi problems, no ink cartridge DRM, but modern printers have been deliberately made more complex. They've added wireless connectivity that barely works. They've added apps and cloud services and firmware updates. They've added security chips to ink cartridges. They've added sensors that detect third-party paper. They've added features that nobody asked for, like faxing, which nobody uses anymore, while making the core printing function less reliable. Why would they do this? Because complexity creates dependence. When something is simple, you can fix it yourself or buy a generic replacement part. But when something is complex, when it requires proprietary software and authenticated cartridges and firmware updates and Wi-Fi handshakes, you're locked into their ecosystem. You can't easily switch brands. You can't use cheaper alternatives. You're stuck. Think about it this way. Remember when you could just plug in headphones and they worked? Then Bluetooth headphones came along and suddenly you had to pair them, charge them, update their firmware, troubleshoot connection issues. The technology got more advanced but less reliable. That's what happened to printers. Except with printers, the unreliability isn't a trade-off, it's the point. This matters because it affects how you perceive the problem. When your printer fails, you blame yourself. You think, maybe you didn't follow the setup instructions correctly. Maybe you bought the wrong paper. Maybe your Wi-Fi isn't strong enough. Maybe you're just bad with technology. But that's exactly what they want you to think. The confusion is intentional. The overcomplicated setup process is designed to make you feel incompetent so you won't question why a 40-year-old technology still doesn't work properly. And here's what makes this even more surprising. Printers have actually gotten worse over time. I know that sounds impossible. Technology is supposed to improve, right? But think about it. 20 years ago, you plugged a printer into your computer with a cable. You installed one driver CD. It worked. Now you need to create an account with HP or Epson. You need to download multiple pieces of software. You need to connect it to your Wi-Fi, which involves typing your password on a tiny 2-inch screen with arrow buttons. You need to agree to send usage data back to the company. You need to enable automatic ink cartridge shipments. You need to troubleshoot why your Mac can see the printer, but your Windows laptop can't. The technology got more complicated, but less functional. And this wasn't an accident or an oversight. This was a strategic business decision. Because every layer of complexity is another opportunity to sell you something or collect your data or lock you into their subscription service. Which brings me to something even deeper. There's a third pattern here that explains why printer companies can get away with this. I call it the captive market trap. And this one's particularly sneaky because it reveals something uncomfortable about how modern capitalism actually works. Here's the thing about printers. You can't really not have one. I mean, you can try to go fully paperless. Lots of people try. But eventually, you'll need to print something. A government form that only accepts physical signatures. A shipping label for a return. A recipe because it's easier to read on paper while cooking. A coloring page for your kid. A contract that requires a wet signature. Our society still runs partially on paper, which means you still need a printer occasionally. But occasionally is the problem. If you printed every day, you'd notice ink costs and you'd optimize. You'd research the best value. You'd maybe even switch to a laser printer or an ink tank model. But because you only print occasionally, you don't think about it strategically. You just buy whatever's on sale at Target or whatever's eligible for free shipping on Amazon, and then you're stuck with that company's ink ecosystem. This connects to something even deeper. The printer industry has perfected something I call manufactured frustration. They've figured out exactly how much pain they can inflict before you abandon the product entirely. Too reliable and you won't buy enough ink. Too unreliable and you'll switch to a competitor. So they've calibrated it perfectly. The printer works just well enough that you don't immediately return it. But it fails just often enough that you're constantly buying replacement ink, replacement cartridges, extended warranties, tech support calls, and once you see this, you can't unsee it. Every design choice makes sense through this lens. Why does the printer report low ink when the cartridge is still half full? Because they want you buying ink more frequently. Why does it refuse to print black when you're out of cyan? Because they want you buying all the colors, not just the one you need. Why do cartridges have expiration dates? Because they want to prevent you from stockpiling ink during sales. Why did they make the cartridges smaller while keeping the same price? Because you'll run out faster and buy more frequently. But here's what nobody wants to admit. This isn't just about printers. This is the blueprint for how lots of modern technology works. Make the initial purchase cheap or even free. Lock people into an ecosystem, then extract ongoing revenue through subscriptions, proprietary parts, planned obsolescence, and artificial scarcity. Your phone that can't replace the battery. Your coffee maker that only works with proprietary pods. Your car that requires dealer-only repairs. Your game console that charges for online play. It's the same model, just applied to different products. What's actually happening is a fundamental shift in what it means to own something. You bought the printer, you own it. Right? Wrong. You own the plastic shell, but you don't control what it does. The company controls that through firmware updates and DRM chips and software authentication. They can remotely disable features. They can force updates that make it slower or more restrictive. They can decide your third-party ink cartridges are suddenly incompatible. You paid for the device, but they still own the relationship. This is what the research actually shows. When engineers from third-party ink companies tear down official cartridges, they find that the actual ink inside costs maybe $2 per cartridge. The rest of that $30 price tag, that's the cost of the proprietary chip, the special packaging, the brand markup, and pure profit margin. You're not paying for ink. You're paying rent to use the printer you already own. And it's not just about money. It's about power and control. Why else would HP launch a service where they ship you ink automatically and monitor how much you print? They literally called it Instant Ink, and it requires you to stay connected to the internet so they can track your printing. If you cancel the subscription, the cartridges they sent you stop working, even if they still have ink in them, even if you paid for them, because those cartridges are still theirs according to the terms of service you agreed to without reading. Let me show you something. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus has the exact same printer as Jake bought it the same day at the same Target, but Marcus took a different approach. Before he even plugged in the printer, he went online and researched. He learned about the ink scam. He learned about third-party cartridges that cost a quarter of the price. He learned that you can often override low ink warnings by resetting the cartridge chip or just ignoring the alert and trying to print anyway. So when Marcus got his printer home, he immediately threw away the starter cartridges that came with it because those are deliberately underfilled, designed to run out quickly so you'll buy full-price replacements. He ordered a set of third-party cartridges instead, saved $60 right there. Then, when the printer tried to force him to set up wireless printing and create an account and join the ink subscription program, Marcus just hit skip on everything. He plugged in a basic USB cable, no app needed, no account needed, no Wi-Fi needed, just a cable that works every single time with zero configuration. And here's what happened. Marcus has been using his printer for 2 years now. He spent maybe $40 total on ink using third-party cartridges. His printer has never mysteriously forgotten how to print. He's never spent an hour troubleshooting Wi-Fi connectivity. He's never gotten an error message about firmware updates. His printer does one thing. It prints, and it does it reliably because he removed all the unnecessary complexity that was designed to fail. Notice how Marcus's printer isn't fundamentally different from Jake's. Same model, same hardware. The difference is that Marcus understood the game being played and opted out wherever possible. He simplified. Instead of accepting the default complicated setup, he used generic alternatives instead of proprietary ones. He treated the printer like a tool instead of a relationship. That's because Jake approached the printer on the company's terms. He followed their setup wizard, he downloaded their app, he believed their low ink warnings, he bought their cartridges, and the system is designed to extract maximum money from people who do that. But Marcus approached it on his own terms. He stripped away everything except the core function, and suddenly the printer works fine. Here's what most people don't realize. The printer isn't broken. The printer works perfectly. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to maximize ongoing revenue extraction while providing just barely enough functionality that you don't return it. When you understand that this is the actual design goal, suddenly all the bizarre failures make perfect sense. It's not actually about printing documents at all. It's about creating a recurring revenue stream from a one-time purchase. The people who succeed with printers don't have more technical knowledge. They don't have better Wi-Fi or newer computers or more patience. They understand that the printer is running a specific program designed to cost them money, and they work around that program wherever possible. The question isn't whether your printer will fail. It will. That's guaranteed by design. The question is whether you'll recognize what's actually happening when it does. Because now you know about the ink hostage model, you know about the complexity illusion, you know about the captive market trap. You can't unknow this, and that changes everything. These patterns aren't personal failures. They're not because you're bad with technology or unlucky or impatient. They're predictable traps built into the system that catch everyone. But now that you understand how the game works, you can make different choices. You can buy a laser printer instead of an inkjet. You can use generic cartridges. You can connect via cable instead of Wi-Fi. You can ignore low ink warnings. You can opt out of subscriptions and accounts and apps. So think about everything we just explored. The printer that costs less than its refills. The fake complexity that serves no user benefit. The proprietary locks that prevent cheaper alternatives. The firmware designed to fail at specific intervals. The DRM chips and ink cartridges. The forced subscriptions and internet connectivity for a device that's physically sitting on your desk. All of this connects to a business model that profits from your frustration. Remember the ink hostage model? That's why cartridges cost more than the printer. Remember the complexity illusion? That's why Wi-Fi printing mysteriously fails. Remember the captive market trap? That's why you're stuck buying their ink. This all connects to the fundamental insight that you don't actually own your printer in any meaningful way. You're just renting the privilege of using it by buying expensive ink. The empowering thing to understand here is that none of this is inevitable. Printers don't have to be this way. The technology has existed for decades to make reliable, affordable, user-friendly printers. But the business model prevents that from happening. And once you see that, you realize the failures aren't mysterious, they're strategic. You're not fighting against technological limitations, you're fighting against a profit model. The question isn't whether you can print reliably. The question is whether you'll recognize the patterns when your printer inevitably fails in predictable ways. Because now you know the ink warnings are often false. You know the complexity is artificial. You know the failures are designed. You can't unknow it. And that gives you power because you can make informed decisions about which parts of their system to participate in and which parts to bypass. So next time you're standing in front of your printer at 11 p.m. trying to print something due tomorrow and it's telling you it's out of cyan even though you're printing in black and white, and the wireless connection just dropped for no reason and the driver needs updating and the paper jammed somehow, ask yourself, is this really a mysterious technical failure? Or is this a business model working exactly as designed? Because once you see printers this way, everything looks different. You stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking you need to learn more about technology. You recognize that you're not fighting a machine, you're fighting a business strategy. And that's something you can actually navigate. That's something you can work around. That's something you have power over. Not by fixing the printer, but by understanding what game it's playing and refusing to play along.